Today at Deutsche Auto Parts, we're going to be going over the top 5 VW and Audi engines of all time. Okay, so before we go into our list, want to cover a few notes. Number one, this is my personal opinion based on what I feel. You may have different beliefs. If you have a different list of top 5 engines, be sure to leave it in the comments below. In regards to the list of engines, this is not going to be a list of supercar engines or anything like that. This is intended to be stuff that is attainable for regular people. So let's get into the list. Number 5, the 1.8T. Now the 1.8T is not currently known for being the most high horsepower tunable engine, but for its time it had a significant place in VW's history. In the late 90s and early 2000s, when the 1.8T was prevalent, most of the competition was naturally aspirated engines, which were somewhere in the 150 to 170 horsepower range. Most of those engines were similar horsepower to a 1.8Ts, which ranged from 150, 170, 180, and 225 horsepower. But the main key difference was the fact that the 1.8T was a turbo engine made the tunability significantly higher. So you're looking at basic bolt-ons on a lot of those 1.8T engines. You're looking at roughly 250, maybe 300 horsepower out of some of the 225 larger turbo engines, which would be basic bolt-ons and a chip, which actually back then there were actual physical chips that soldered in place. All that stuff made the 1.8T a super important engine for the VW and Audi community, and debatably one of the most important engines in making VW an enthusiast brand at that time. Number 4, the 3.0T Audi engine. If you've been following the S4 at all since its debut in the 90s, you know that all the glory tied to that model has a lot of grief surrounding it. We actually covered a lot more detail on this specific subject in a video we'll link up here. The 3.0T in the S4 model is the first S4 that, in my opinion, is a solid, reliable choice for the average automotive enthusiast. In its stock form, putting out 333 horsepower, it still has a lot of room left for tunability. With basic bolt-ons of a supercharger pulley and the software, you're looking at getting around 120 horsepower bump, putting you just under 450 horsepower. All of those things make the 3.0T a solid, tunable, reliable engine, putting you at number 4. Number 3, the 5-cylinder turbo Audi engine. Now, through the years, there have been multiple 5-cylinder turbo Audis, and they're all cut from the same cloth, so we lumped them into one. The first 5-cylinder Audi engine was a 10-valve 5-cylinder turbo, which came in the Audi 100. The later 20-valve 5-cylinder turbo engine was a much more desirable engine for enthusiasts to get. That engine is most known for being in the all-wheel drive Audi 90, which raced in the 1989 IMSA series car. In that series in 1989, that Audi 90 won an astonishing 7 of 13 races in that series. Audi then took all that heritage and rolled it into the TTRS. Now the TTRS has a stock output of 340 horsepower, but with just basic software, you can get it over 400. That doesn't even begin to account for the hardcore guys who are putting big turbos on their TTRSs and pumping out in this 600-700 horsepower range. All of that makes the 5-cylinder turbo Audi engines an awesome option for VW and Audi enthusiasts, and number 3 on our list. Number 2, the VR6 engine. Now, there's no way we could have made a list like this without talking about the VR6 engine. It is without a doubt one of the most iconic engines in the VW brand. Now, let's take a quick look at how the VR6 differs from standard engines. If we take a look here, we have an inline engine, a V engine, and a VR engine. If we're using 6 cylinders as an example, the inline engine would be 6 cylinders all in a straight line. The V engine would be 3 cylinders on one side, 3 cylinders on the other, in the shape of a V. That is a 90-degree angle. If we look at a VR engine, you would have 3 engines on one side, 3 on the other. They would be in a narrow, tight V and staggered together. So if we take a look at this example here showing a V engine next to a VR engine, you can take a look and see how all the V engine, they are spread wide apart at that 90-degree angle, and the cylinders are all in parallel across from each other. If you look at the VR6 engine, obviously they are all on one cylinder head straight up and down, but more importantly, they stagger back and forth to allow that really, really tight angle of the cylinder. How is this useful? Now, an inline engine is extremely long and makes it tough to fit into under the hood of most vehicles. A V engine is a much shorter platform, but its wideness makes that also a challenge. Volkswagen designed the VR engine to be a tight, compact design with still a larger displacement, making it a great option for a front-wheel drive 6-cylinder vehicle. Aside from its cool design, the VR6 engine has a lot of love for being a bulletproof engine that has big horsepower potential. By adding a turbo or turbos, you can get a lot of power. There are tons of VR6 engines that are well over 500 horsepower that are out there. The VR6 was used in the early 90s and is still used today in some other variations. They no longer call it the VR6, they've changed to V6, but it's essentially the same engineering, same design with modern technology attached to it. The VR6 has a huge cult following. They're even swapped into Mark 1s, Mark 2s, and we even saw a boat that has a VR6 engine in it. There was even an event created around the VR6 sound called Wookiee in the Woods. This was created because people compare the sound of a VR6 engine to the sound of a Wookiee. This beloved sound is what lands the VR6 engine at number 2 on our top 5 list. Number 1, the MQB 2.0T engine. For the past decade or so, VW and Audi have been a little bit behind their competition when it comes to performance models. So if we were to compare a GTI to a WRX, or a Golf R or an R32 to a STI, in both cases they would be similar price point, but behind in both power and handling. Now for me, it never mattered. I never thought about changing brands because I love the fit and finish and overall look of the vehicles, which is why I bleed blue. The MQB 2.0T reminds me very much of the 1.8T back when it came out. When we compare it to its competitors and overall tunability, power-wise, price point, all those components combined, it's always head and shoulders above its competition, while still not sacrificing the fit and finish that all the VW owners love. With basic software add-ons, we're talking about 100 additional horsepower for just a flash. Now, you add a downpipe onto that and other bolt-on mods, we're going steps above. So if we were to compare a, let's say, TSI engine on a Mark 6 GTI to a comparable current version. A Mark 6 GTI with a KO4 turbo, as per Unitronics numbers, we're a Unitronic dealer, so it makes the most sense for us to compare those items. KO4 from a Unitronic is 340 horsepower. Now that obviously requires more bolt-ons than just a turbo, but it's turbo, downpipe, intake, sometimes maybe intercooler, and then software. If we were to compare that to a Mark 7 GTI with a downpipe and software, you're looking at 337 horsepower for just the software and the downpipe. Now, if we looked at the R model and the S3 model, which are the bigger turbo engines, they're upwards of 400 horsepower with just software and basic bolt-on tunability. All these components make the MQB 2.0T a game changer, making this model a mainstream, highly desirable vehicle, which is changing the VW and Audi community. The big power potential for a very reasonable cost has landed the MQB 2.0T at the number 1 spot. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it very much. Feel free to share your feedback on what you feel like the list of the top 5 VW and Audi engines of all time should be.